Hey, what's up, everybody? Matt Montanez here. Today I'm going to do something a little different instead of about plugins or Pro Tools and things like that I usually do on my channel. I'm going to talk about choosing the right mixing engineer. And this video is directed a lot more to artists, songwriters, producers, but it's good tips too that engineers can pick up. I decided to do this because I get a lot of artists come to me or email or direct message me, and they all say, hey man, let's work. Can you mix this record for me and things like that? And yes, that would be great. I would love to work with every single person who comes to me and wants to work with me. But there's just a few problems with it, like their budget, their sound they're looking for doing, and if we're actually just the right connection to vibe with. That's something very, very, very important to know is when you get a mixing engineer, especially someone you really, really, really want to grow with, it's good to make sure you guys vibe out correctly and you guys can really work together flawlessly. Like you both can take criticism and things like that. And you're both willing to grow, because there's a lot of times where you're working with this engineer and you guys just aren't the right fit. So there's just a lot of back and forth on changes to make. Yes, changes are good. It's creating a better product, but at times this engineer just doesn't work and do that style, or can't do what you want because they don't do that kind of work. So it's just a lot of different things. So the first thing I want to talk about is, what is mixing? Mixing engineers is what we do is we balance a song's elements. That's the levels, the frequencies, the dynamics, and we make sure that all these elements for the song, which is drums, guitar, keys, vocals, synths, are really balanced together so everything can be heard and make the song sounding right. So while we're doing that, we're enhancing the good elements of the song. So let's say the guitar is something that sounds really, really sweet and good. We're going to enhance that and make that sound really good. Or certain elements in the drums. For example, you have a cool kick drum, which has like a little bit of knock. Well, we want more of that, so we're going to enhance the knock on the kick drum to really make it punch through and come forward. But keeping in mind is, while we're enhancing those frequencies and those elements, we also enhance the bad. So let's say you have vocals and the vocals were recorded really, really bad in a horrible sounding room. Then no matter what we do when we're enhancing the good parts of the vocals, the bad parts are going to come out too. So you're going to hear more of the room sound and things like that. Yeah, we can do our best to really pull out those sounds, but we can only do so much. And it comes back to that whole saying is, you cannot polish a turd. So if you give me something that doesn't sound good, I cannot create magic and really make it sound that much better. I'm only enhancing the song and making sure everything is balanced out. And then we also do at the very end, we add a thing I like to call ear candy. And ear candy is the effects, delay effects, reverb effects, filters, distortion, panning, a lot of cool things like that, where we're adding drops and stuff to keep the listener interested the entire song from beginning to end. And all these things we do really create the song to make it sound better. So what is mixing going to do? Mixing will tighten the performance so everything is together and on time, like drums and guitars, especially since some people just don't play the click track very well. We tighten the performances and things like that to make it sound better, so enhancing the good parts of it. We make all the instruments audible so you can hear everything. Nothing's getting buried by other tracks, especially like bass and kick. A lot of times that stuff gets buried, especially with engineers barely starting off, but we make sure every element, every instrument can be heard. The next thing we do is we make the song sound more beautiful, so it sounds good and pleasing to the ear. And the last thing in here, what mixing will do is it's creating more emotion to your song. So if it's a heartfelt song, we're making it sound more heartfelt so people can really feel the song. When it has a lot of energy and stuff like that, we're adding more of the energy frequencies to create more energy in the song and make people really enjoy it if we're a club track and things like that. So what are you looking for when choosing an engineer? The first thing is the style of the engineer. Okay, you gotta know the style of your engineer. For example, you don't want to approach an engineer that only does rock music with a hip hop track and said, here, can you do this? Or you don't want to do that to a hip hop engineer and you're a rock band. It just won't come out the way you want it to sound, because they're not familiar with that genre, or they're not too familiar with that drama. Whether they listen to that genre a lot or not, they at least need to be working with it so they understand on how to balance out the elements for that specific genre. So what you should do is you should listen to the engineer's catalog and see what they actually work on. If it's pop music they do, if it's hip hop music, if it's rock music. Yeah, a lot of engineers can do a whole lot of different genres. Great. But when you're first starting out, you might want to make sure they at least have some familiarity so your song comes out the way you want it sounding. The next thing, which I already talked about a little bit, is you want to make sure they work on your genre so it blends in together. So like if they're doing pop music is something I do and you're a hip hop artist, you want me to do your hip hop track, that'd be great. I can do hip hop. I can mix hip hop. But keep in mind, since my genre is pop music, I'm going to add a lot of pop elements to your song, whether it's the effects, the sound of it, making it a little bit brighter than you're normally used to, because I mix pop records. And then you want to make sure it's similar to your sound. For example, you got someone who does something like a Justin Bieber sound, and then you sound more like Drake. There's no way they're going to make you continue to sound like Justin Bieber. It's going to have those Drake elements. So you need to make sure that they are similar to your sound, they work in your genre, and you want to check their catalog to just make sure it's in that whole general area. So check the style of the engineer. 2, the sound of the engineer. So what I mean by the sound of the engineer is, does something stand out from their work? So did they mix a record that you truly like and it stood out to you and you're like, oh my gosh, I love the way this record sounds? Or something they did in that song that really shined and it's like, oh yeah, I like that. I want them to do that to my record. That's what I mean by the sound of the engineer here. And you also want to make sure that the sound of this engineer, that their songs actually sound finished. I can't tell you how many times that I've actually opened up SoundCloud or even Spotify and heard records that just shuffled in and it didn't even sound complete. The song didn't sound finished. So make sure that's done, that the song actually sounds finished. And another thing to look for is just make sure it sounds professional. Make sure it sounds radio ready, ready to be put in film or something like that, and ready to be broadcast on Spotify or Apple Music. Make sure it sounds professional. The third thing to check out is check the engineer's credits. There's a lot of places you can see the engineer's credits. For one, you can always check checking the engineer's credits. You can always check something like their website. You can always check the actual songs in the SoundCloud. There's the description there. I know Tidal has the credits available to view and things like that. Check their credits, see if the engineers worked on credits that you liked, you can see what they've worked on before. You can check testimonials and reviews. A lot of engineers have testimonials or reviews on their website in like a slideshow, or even like on Sound Better, for example. There's a lot of reviews there for the work engineers have done. The fourth thing, which is the last thing for what to look for when choosing an engineer, is what is your budget? And the reason why I say that, because budgets can vary big time and engineers are costly, but you can also find some that are in your budget that do quality work. But you need to see what is your budget for your project or single or EP or whatever you're working on. So basically there are different sizes of budget. You got beginner engineer, and these guys usually start off between anywhere from like $25 a song to $100 a song. And it's like a very beginning budget. And you got to keep in mind though, it's probably not going to sound professional. It's probably not going to sound finished. And there might be stuff that's clashing just because they're starting off. This can be basically, like free $25, $100 for an engineer who's like a friend or a beginner. Then you got someone who's starting off professionally. And a lot of these guys start off at like $100 a track to like $300 to $500. Somewhere's roughly around there. And yeah, they probably have a couple credits or something good, and they're starting to sound professionally done and their song's complete. And they're doing really well. They just haven't built up a catalog yet or a credits under their name. Then you also got someone who has recognizable credits. So you got someone who's done quite a big few things. For example, like me, myself, I belong in this category who has recognizable credits because I've did the Cartoon Network track Catching Villains for the one that Beast Boy sings. I've worked with Fast Sean. I've done stuff with him on his projects. I've done stuff with Planet Asia. I also have stuff done that were in film, which was one was on the HBO show Girls and things like that. So there's a few recognizable credits there, and that's where I'm in. And then you also have the engineers who have a Grammy, which are more costly. And these engineers cost roughly like $600 to $1,500 to have them mix your song. And that's not bad, especially since they have the credits under their name. And the last category is the top tier engineers, the engineers who have plugins named after them, like Andrew Sheps, Chris Lord-Alge, you got Tony Maserati. You got all these engineers, but there's not just because they only got plugins, but you got also guys like Jason Joshua who works with all the top artists in the world, the A-list artists. And those guys can be very, very costly, a few $1,000s up. So those are the budgets for the engineers that you get. You got your friend who's a beginner, it can be free to about $100. You got someone starting off professionally, which is like about $100 to $300. Someone with recognizable credits, about $300 to $500. And then you got the guy with the Grammy who's about $500 to $1,500, and then top tier engineers who can be a few $1,000s. So yeah, just make sure all these things, check the style of the engineer, check the sound that they're doing, check the reputation, their credits and stuff, and then the budget, because you want to make sure all those things work. All right, guys, I hope this really, really helped you guys out. Just some things to keep in mind and really look out for when you're choosing your engineer so you can really vibe out and just keep creating music as fast as possible and putting stuff out. All right, guys, take care. Keep creating music. Have a good day.